Last month, I went to Spain and Portugal for a few weeks, and this is part one of, in no particular order, my tips for a successful and productive time on the Iberian Peninsula. So, part one, Pamplona. I recommend Pamplona as one of the smaller towns I visited. Pamplona has about 100,000 people who live there, um, even though it's in Basque country. So, here are a few tips for a good time in Pamplona. Number one, don't go to Pamplona on Monday. I arrived on Sunday night, got up on Monday, and discovered that just about everything in Pamplona of historical note is closed on Monday. Also on some other days, but every Monday the city is basically closed. So I was able to do a lot of walking, see a lot of things, go buy a lot of things, and then the next day, if you want, you can go back and see the insides of things that you otherwise can't get into because they're closed on Monday. Do I need to see those things? No. By the time I arrived in Pamplona, I had been on vacation for about 10 days. And so I'd seen cathedrals, I'd seen castles, I'd seen museums already. And so, aside from the fact that it is why I went there, which was the only disappointing thing, I was able to learn just about everything I wanted to know. So I chose Pamplona because Pamplona is the capital of the former Kingdom of Navarre. It's in Basque country, so when you arrive, I arrived on the train, you'll find that the signs on the streets are first in whatever the Basques speak on the top, and then in Spanish below it. Now, the guy who ran the place where I stayed, he didn't speak Basque. He just spoke Spanish, and he spoke English. There are a surprising, given the city, there were a surprisingly high number of people who don't speak English, given the popularity of Pamplona at other times of the year. He also didn't know when things were open because he lives there. He lived on the other side of the town from where I was staying. So, but he tried. They had a map there, which was great because the city of Pamplona, number two, is one of the most medieval, tiny street cities that I have ever been in, where it's probably two people could stand with their arms outstretched, finger to finger, and you can stretch across the widest city in the old downtown section. A lot of the historical things in Pamplona are gone. They were done away with in 1900 when the rulers of the Pamplona district of the nation of Spain decided that the town had outgrown the original walls and fortifications. So as you come up the hill from the train station, you can still see the old city wall. And then I walked basically around it to where the fortifications have been taken down. I don't know what cardinal direction that was, but to where they opened up the non-river side and tore most of that down so that the city can expand that direction. Then, of course, built on the other side of the river, just downhill from the old fortification. They kept the old fort there as a park, but most of the rest of what would have been the defensive frontal protection for the city there has been done away with in favor of putting new buildings there, including the block of buildings where the place was that I stayed. So avoid Mondays and be prepared to see a lot of things in Basque. Number three, Pamplona is very friendly. The people there were helpful. They didn't seem to, even though a lot of them don't speak English very well, they are accustomed to having foreign nationals in their town all the time because Pamplona is popular because of the running of the bulls. I went to where they house the bulls, where they put the bulls before the run. And I got up one morning on Monday morning, and I walked from the route that they do the running of the bulls to the stadium. And it's just about a little bit more than a half a mile, but I would not want to be in that street when they're running the bulls. There is nowhere to go and escape. And they kind of know that. There's just to I guess the south of where the arena is, there's a statue to the running of the bulls, and at least four of the people in the statue are either being gored or run over by bulls. So they know that this happens. So no thanks. I was there when I wanted to be there. I was able to see the arena for free because at Christmas time there's a Christmas market inside of it. And it was probably the most interesting of the Christmas markets in terms of, even though it was very small, it had the most variety of shops. So if you are interested in shopping, that would be where I would go shopping in a Christmas market in Spain, is in Pamplona. Pamplona is very small, but it's also very compact. Once I got the lay of the land and figured out where to go, it was very easy to get around. They have buses there because it is a small town. They just have buses. There's no other public transportation besides the trains that come in and out. And so you're either busing, biking, or walking. There's a lot of people who bike. One of the most interesting things was the nuns there. There are a significant number of churches in Pamplona, churches, cathedral. That was not the best cathedral I went into, although it was the cheapest. That one only cost €5, and you got to go up in the bell tower, which I've never done before, and into some of the sleeping quarters of the monastery. Of course, half of the monastery there is off limits because there's still an archbishop who lives there, and part of that is his living quarters, and then of course where all the monks in the monastery actually live. But there were several rooms I was able to get into, and that one that you can't get into in most of the monasteries. And all the monasteries are open. The courtyards are open in the places I went to during Christmas time because there's a nativity set up in the courtyard on the grass. Sometimes more than one, and so they let people come in and see them. So that was, if you want to see that, that's a good time to go. And it was kind of nice to see them with a focus on Christ. Pamplona also had the best weather of anywhere that I went in Spain, despite being in the mountains. It's up near the Pyrenees, so in December it should have been probably wetter. It was the driest place. Even Madrid, which is near to the central plain, was wet. Portugal was worse. And it was a little bit cold in Pamplona, but it was dry. And so for the first time after arriving, I got to walk around without being sopping wet. So a few things to keep in mind. Getting to Pamplona is not easy. Pamplona is at the end of a rail line, so you don't have to rent a car, ride the train, or there is an airport there because I'm sure of the running of the bulls. If you go when the bulls are running, which is in July, you have a lot of traffic, but their Independence Day is the 6th of July, so there's a big festival in the main plaza, which is probably really cool to see. Of course, the place I stayed at was €35 for the night. In July, it was 200. So, which is why I went now, because I'm a cheapskate and I wasn't really sure I wanted to be there for the running of the bulls. And I think I made the right call. There are a lot of cheap souvenirs there. That is basically what Pamplona is famous for. But the fortress, the fortifications, and the historical relevance to the city are also interesting. This is where the King of Navarre lived. This was his palace, and this is where he fled from when the allied Seville, Leon, Cordoba, Kingdom of Spain came to invade Navarre in the early 1500s. So it was interesting. I wanted to go there because it was part of the Kingdom of Navarre, and it was one of the client kingdoms in the old Roman province of Hispania, and it was probably one of the best choices of anywhere that I went on my trip to Spain. So I highly recommend it. Unless you want to see all the museums and you don't arrive on a Monday, you can see pretty much everything you need to see in Pamplona in a day. The old town city is not that big. There are some significantly steep hills, so plan accordingly, but there are very good maps of Pamplona available there so that you don't get lost. And basically, the old town is all there is of significance, and the fortress, if you care. Everything else is just a modern European city. Nothing of note unless you're super into Basque culture. And I don't think the Basque do anything particularly interesting at Christmas. In the main plaza, along the Running the Bull route, there is the City Hall, which was interesting from the outside. But a lot of the things there they preserve the facade of the building and when they remodel, and then they tear everything else out. So a lot of the buildings there, the facing is historic, and then the rest of the building has been completely rebuilt. So aside from walking along and seeing the facades of buildings, there's really not a whole lot to do there in town, unless you want to go to a concert in the churches. One last final note: I did sit in on a noon mass in the oldest standing church there, built in 1200 A.D. And it was interesting because it was one of the darkest and most cramped church buildings I've been in Spain. And there were actually priests there hearing confessions, which was very interesting. Also, I noticed, and I've never seen this in a Catholic ceremony before, after the priest finished speaking, there was a woman who also came up and read from the Bible at the pulpit, which was not something I've ever seen in any other Catholic church. I've seen it in other churches, but I've never seen the Catholics do this anywhere else. So that was, where was that in the city? I'll have to look it up. I can't remember. Anyway, Pamplona was definitely worth the visit, but you don't need a whole ton of time there to see. It is a little bit out of the way as opposed to some of the other towns I will highlight in this that are much, much closer to your major metropolitan areas and your major airports. Anyway, if you go to Spain, remember that the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain, but it rained everywhere in Spain while I was there, at least at Christmas time.